I'm Mike Fox from Nash Partnership, and
I'm Lindy Morgan from Southmead Development Trust, a community anchor organisation in Bristol.
So to start again, we think in terms of making people-friendly places, people are key. I suppose that's the strapline here, really. We're here to talk about one of the largest community-led development projects in the UK. That is the regeneration of central Southmead. For those that don't know, Southmead is a suburb in northern Bristol and has the dubious pleasure of being one of the 10% most deprived wards in the UK. It wasn't always thus, at least on paper. It was originally conceived as part of a very grand vision, as part of one of many council-led house building schemes in the 1920s and 1930s, and then further delivered in the 1950s on the edges of Bristol. It was built in the garden suburb style, and I'm sure we're probably familiar with many of the principles it followed. So we're talking about relatively low density, car-oriented, large green spaces, a wealth of public infrastructure, including a range of public facilities. I think on this screen you can probably see a cinema even, which for a community of this kind of density was quite ambitious. There's also a range of different places of worship and other sorts of facilities around the main square, Glencoyne. In many ways, though, that sowed the seeds of its issues today. So it was interrupted in terms of the break of war, so the breakout of the Second World War. So delivered in the 20s and 30s and then the 50s. Obviously, money was a bit of an issue. Low-density car-oriented development has led to spatial issues in terms of access by means other than the car. And it was a concentration of poverty. So I think somewhere in the region of 46% of young people and children in the early days were actually below the poverty line. And this has sowed the seeds of some of the problems, as I say. So in terms of life expectancy, for example, Southmead the expectancy is about 9 years less than neighbouring Henleys. But it's not all bad. So I'm going to turn to Lindy now to talk about some of the good stuff.
Yeah, because we're really talking about the people-friendly bit. Well, this is the people actually not very happy, not very friendly, turning it around and saying we demand better. And so we've got the Southmead Development Trust, which is a charity set up in '95. We have a disused secondary school as our base. From that, can we move the slide on?
Sorry, yeah.
From that, you can see some of the activities that we get up to. Some of you will have heard about social prescribing. We are in partnership with our local health suppliers. Also, we've got a community gym, cafe. We rent spaces to local businesses to try and generate some of our own income, so we're not wholly reliant on grant, but primarily we are there to work for the community and improve the lives of the community within which we work. And then what we did as part of that is like, well, how do we identify what the priorities are for that community? You know, there's just so many issues. Where do you start? And they did a really good piece of work and developed a community plan. And local residents were trained to do the surveys for this. And they door knocked and carried out 975 qualitative surveys on people's front doors, as well as various public meetings, came up with a community plan, which then has 9 themes with their priorities. And out of that came the start of the master plan.
Okay, so organisations like our own were invited to compete. The images on the right-hand side there show you the outcome of a very competitive tendering process we all went through to get the job, which involved quite an extensive level of community engagement, including, I think there was 3 days of various drop-in sessions, exhibitions, and speed dating, which is the first time I've ever done that in trying to secure a job.
I'm surprised you won.
Not the first time I've heard that either. So in terms of the process, it was quite condensed, it was quite compact, but we came up with a conceptual master plan, which we then really had to test with the community because it wasn't necessarily founded on the level of engagement we would like. So we went through a process of involving many things, many media, such as roaming street stalls, where we went around the community speaking to people, effectively chasing them down the street with a street stall and asking them what they wanted in their community, particularly out of a regeneration project like this. Drop-in sessions, pop-up events, attending local groups. I think Lindy could give you chapter and verse about that, including a travelling teapot for more elderly residents. Interactive model making, and attending a local festival. This all gave us enough intelligence to then have the model making workshop, where we tried to devise a series of options using this rather nifty kind of kit that you can see on the slide there. And that was tested against a series of aspirations which we gleaned from the community and also the community plan. We then selected a preferred option from those based on the themes and aspirations identified using the regeneration board established by the SDT, and came up with a final master plan which looks something like this. So that will deliver circa 300 homes plus new community uses across central Southmead. Key to that, the key concept really is about, so the main site at the centre of that master plan is currently open space, and I'm sure those involved in estate regeneration projects will be familiar with building on open space that's underused and unloved to unlock further sites. So that was quite a critical site. That was delivering a mix of housing, health centre, library and other things, which then was a catalyst for other sites coming forward. We also wanted to strengthen the spine, so having this kind of northern node of community uses and also a southern node with a community centre, which would enhance the viability of the centre itself, which would also be greened up and the remaining open space improved. That was the master plan. That was done in 3 months and adopted last September, and now we've progressed on to phase 1.
So phase 1 is the main square, Glencoyne, and we really wanted to crack on because you saw when that community plan was produced in 2015, and when it's like, can you just get on and do it? So there is an element of that, but at the same time making sure that we've got really good engagement, because I think also relating back to what we've been hearing earlier is about community ownership. And I know we were talking about economically and physical ownership, but we want both. We want that local ownership in both the feeling of pride and it's theirs, as well as physically through social enterprise. So we knew we needed to keep that momentum going and to increase the engagement. We really needed to crack on. So in January, we appointed our contractor on a pre-construction services agreement, worked with these guys. Clearly, it's a really positive relationship. And then we had the other consultants come in, and we've done the engagement, and we've just put in for our planning application 20th of September. So 9 months we've done that in. He's only 12.
So that will deliver around 120 homes, health centre that we talked about, library, live workspace and other flexible spaces. So adaptability is part of that, which I know we've talked about earlier as well as being an important part of the town centre. We've consolidated the open space into something that is perhaps a bit less ambitious than we wanted it to be because of discussions with the council parks team, and maintenance was an issue there. Which I know was also raised earlier. But, you know, it actually is kind of a blank canvas to be built on. So the idea being that the Glencoyne's Garden Friends Group could be set up, and actually we can develop community gardening campaigns as part of social prescribing, which is in the remit of SDT. So in terms of some of the challenges, I think the lower values in the area is difficult in terms of meeting some of the policy requirements, such as affordable housing funded by the scheme itself.
Funding, anyone who's involved with community-led housing will know how difficult it is to access funding. There's actually no pots of national funding available at the moment, because the only pot available expires in March 2020, and you have to have completions by that time. And even funding for pre-dev, there was some for that, but we had a creative Bristol City Council. We persuaded them to underwrite some of our costs in the event that they'll pay the abortive costs if we don't get planning. Managing the local politics, to be fair, the key politicians were wholeheartedly behind it. In fact, they were kind of racing ahead and the officers couldn't keep up, which was kind of tough for the officers. And managing multiple stakeholders, because obviously health, the library and others, more local stakeholders, has been difficult, and the local authority hasn't had enough resource, and it's been the community, it's been us, the community group, that's actually enabled, facilitated and pulled together and kicked to bring in health, one public estate and all of those people together to make this happen and stick with our programme. to give that confidence that the community need.
But there's also some good stuff, so I had to get that in quickly before the buzzer goes. So obviously it's a different bottom line. It's about quality. It's about places that work for people. It's not about profit. There's obviously a challenge in terms of financing, but the end result is actually about delivering more affordable housing, so 85% affordable housing rather than the usual 20%. Greater ambition. People have been asking for things they want rather than things they don't want. Consensus. I think we've managed to effectively bring the council, the community and other groups together in a way that often doesn't happen, particularly with normal development. And building capacity in the community. I mean, we've got some great members of the community who are really passionate about this and are driving it forward, and they are the spokespeople for it. So very positive.
Thank you.